The news spread across every corner of the known galaxy. It wasn't a rumor this time. It wasn't a misunderstanding. Humanity, the youngest species to join the Galactic Council, was being exiled. The vote had been cast, and the results were final. Out of 9 powerful species, 8 voted yes. Only 1 dared to stay silent, perhaps out of pity. The reason was wrapped in layers of excuses. They said humans were too emotional, too aggressive, too unpredictable. They said humanity's inventions were advancing too fast and could disrupt the balance of power. But deep down, everyone knew the truth. The galaxy feared them. Humanity had achieved in 2 centuries what others took millennia to reach. They didn't bow easily. They questioned authority. They dreamed loudly, and that made them dangerous. The announcement came through a single broadcast that echoed through every human colony. Effective immediately, humanity is hereby exiled from Council space. All human colonies are to vacate Council territories within 1 galactic cycle. The words were cold and final. Billions of people stood frozen, watching the message play on their screens. No one spoke. No one even breathed for a few seconds. It was like the air itself had been stolen. Then the panic began. On the outer colonies, people cried and shouted, demanding answers. Some refused to believe it. Others packed their belongings, unsure where to go. The central government on Earth tried to reason with the Council, but no reply came. Even the trade networks that connected Earth with alien civilizations went silent. One by one, the supply lines collapsed. The galaxy had turned its back completely. At first, anger filled every heart. There were protest strikes and even small uprisings. People accused their leaders of failing to protect humanity's place among the stars. But when the last alien ship left orbit, when the final trade gate closed, the truth finally sank in. Humanity was alone again, cut off, isolated, and unwanted. The world's leaders met in orbit above Earth. The mood inside the chamber was heavy. Some argued they should fight back, invade nearby systems, and prove humanity's strength. Others wanted peace, to accept exile quietly and survive somehow. In the end, no one could agree on what to do. Then, from the back of the room, an old commander stood up. His voice was rough, his tone tired but steady. "We've been here before," he said. "Long ago, when humanity was trapped on one planet, we faced plagues, wars, and disasters. Every time we fell, we rose again. This exile is nothing new. It's just another storm to survive." His words lit a spark in the room. Slowly, the shouting died down. The faces that had been twisted in anger began to show something different: determination. Maybe the galaxy had pushed them away. Maybe they had nowhere left to go. But if history had taught humanity anything, it was this: when the world says no, humans build their own path. So began the Great Departure. Hundreds of massive ships, some built for war, others for transport, were gathered into what became known as the Exodus Fleet. Every nation contributed whatever they could: old ships, mining rigs, cargo haulers. Families sold everything to secure a place on board. The ships weren't beautiful. Many were patched together, barely holding pressure. But they represented hope, and that was enough. The day of departure came quietly. The last sunrise over Earth was watched by billions from orbit. People stood by the windows of the great ships, looking down at their home for the last time. Cities glowed faintly under the golden light. Oceans shimmered. Mountains stood tall, proud as always. Then the engines ignited. 1,000 trails of blue flame cut through the darkness as the fleet left orbit. Earth became smaller and smaller, until it was nothing but a blue dot among stars. They didn't know where they were going. The galaxy's maps were useless beyond the Council's borders. What lay ahead was blank space, uncharted, unexplored, unknown. Yet they went forward anyway, because going back was no longer an option. The first few weeks were calm, filled with quiet hope. Children played in the ship corridors. Engineers kept systems running, and leaders held daily broadcasts to keep morale up. People spoke about finding a new world, one that would belong only to humans. But as weeks turned to months, reality began to bite. Supplies started running low. Some ships broke down and had to be left behind. Communication delays made coordination difficult. Fear began creeping back into the fleet. Many nights, people lay awake in their cabins, wondering if they'd made a mistake leaving. Some even prayed to see Earth again, even for a moment. One night, as the fleet drifted through a silent region of space, the stars around them seemed to vanish. The ship's sensors failed. Navigation systems froze and panic spread. It was later called the Black Drift, a vast area of space filled with invisible radiation clouds that blocked all signals. For 7 days, the fleet drifted blind. No one could contact anyone else. Every captain had to decide whether to keep moving or stop and wait. Some ships disappeared forever. Others made it through scarred but alive. When the fleet finally escaped the Black Drift, the humans who survived were changed. The fear of the unknown no longer scared them. They had already faced the worst of it and endured. After that, the fleet began to rebuild its strength. Engineers learned how to recycle energy more efficiently. Farmers grew crops inside zero-gravity domes. People learned new ways to adapt, survive, and protect one another. The longer they traveled, the stronger they became. What began as a scattered group of exiles slowly turned into something greater, a united people bound by one purpose: to find a home. Through it all, stories began spreading through the fleet. Stories of bravery, kindness, and sacrifice. One ship was said to have stayed behind to rescue another stranded vessel, losing all its fuel in the process. Another ship shared its last food stores with smaller crafts. These small acts of humanity kept the flame alive when everything else seemed to fail. Months later, as the fleet passed the edges of known space, the crew gathered in their observation decks. Ahead lay an ocean of stars untouched by any known civilization. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. No one knew what awaited them, new worlds or death among the void. Yet something inside every human whispered that this was not the end, but the beginning. As the ships sailed through the darkness, the oldest among them remembered Earth's history, how humans once crossed oceans in wooden ships, how they survived wars and rebuilt nations. Exile, they realized, was not punishment. It was transformation. The galaxy had not destroyed humanity. It had simply pushed it to evolve. In one of the broadcasts to the entire fleet, a quiet voice spoke. "We were cast out because they feared what we might become. Let's give them a reason to remember why." Those words echoed through every ship, through every heart. From that day forward, the tone changed. People stopped calling themselves the Exiled. They started calling themselves the Voyagers. Engineers began designing new propulsion systems using alien tech they had salvaged before leaving. Scientists studied dark matter more deeply, trying to harness it as fuel. Young cadets trained to become navigators, pilots, and explorers. Every day brought new progress. Even in the endless dark, humanity kept its light alive. There were songs sung across ship radios, laughter in the corridors, and hope shared through stories. Some said the stars themselves seemed to shine brighter wherever the fleet passed. What the galaxy didn't understand was that humanity's strength was never in its weapons or technology. It was in its spirit, the refusal to give up, the courage to dream even when everything seemed lost. They had been exiled, yes, but exile had also freed them from the chains of fear, from the politics and power struggles of the Council. Now they were truly independent. As the first year of exile ended, the fleet entered a vast nebula glowing in shades of blue and gold. It was breathtaking, like sailing through the heart of a storm made of light. The scanners picked up strange signals ahead, possibly planets. Excitement spread quickly through the ships. Could this be it? The new beginning they'd been searching for? The leader of the fleet stood before the main window of the command ship, watching the colors swirl. "We may be exiled," he said softly, "but we are not defeated. We will build something greater than the galaxy ever imagined." The engines roared once more, pushing the ships deeper into the unknown. Behind them was rejection. Ahead of them, destiny. Humanity's story was far from over. It had just taken its first step toward something extraordinary. What no one knew was that this journey through exile would give birth to an empire unlike any other. One that would rise not from conquest but from survival. One that would one day return not as beggars, but as builders of light. And so, in that silent stretch of stars, the exiled children of Earth began writing the next chapter of humankind. The fleet moved farther away from the known galaxy, their ships cutting through the darkness like silver arrows. Stars shimmered in the distance, silent and cold. Every person on board knew there was no turning back. The galaxy had closed its gates behind them, and the road ahead was unmarked and endless. Still the engines burned on, guided by the stubborn will of those who refused to vanish quietly. The journey soon earned a name among the travelers, the long march through the dark. It was not a march of soldiers, but of dreamers and survivors. Every ship carried its own story. Some had been luxury liners once filled with laughter, now turned into floating homes for entire families. Others were old warships repurposed for protection, their hulls scarred from past battles. The fleet was a patchwork of everything humanity had ever built, ugly, fragile, and magnificent in its own way. At first there was hope. People painted their ship walls with bright colors, trying to make life feel normal again. Children played in zero-gravity corridors, their laughter echoing through the metal halls. Scientists set up research labs and promised that they would soon find a new world fit for life. Messages were broadcast every day to keep spirits high, yet time, as always, began to test them. Weeks turned to months, and supplies began to thin. The food printers started to fail, and the recycled water began to taste metallic. The constant hum of the engines became a kind of background music to exhaustion. Sleep was never deep. People woke up often, wondering what day it was or how far they had traveled. One of the greatest challenges was not the distance, it was the silence. Out there, beyond the galaxy's edge, there were no radio signals, no familiar stars, no maps. The universe felt endless, like an ocean with no shore. It played tricks on the mind. Some began to dream of voices calling to them through the static. Others claimed to see strange lights outside the windows, moving too fast to be natural. Still, the fleet continued. Leaders worked tirelessly to keep people united. They reminded everyone that humanity had always been a species that thrived in chaos. They spoke about the old times, when explorers crossed Earth's oceans in wooden ships, not knowing if they would ever find land. The comparison comforted many. If our ancestors could survive storms and starvation, so can we, one of the captains said during a broadcast. Despite the hardships, small miracles began to happen. Engineers developed new systems to recycle energy more efficiently. Farmers grew crops in rotating greenhouses, turning ship corridors into tunnels of green life. Artists began painting stars and suns on the walls to remind people of beauty. Even in despair, humans found a way to create. The fleet eventually reached a vast area of space filled with glowing dust clouds and massive asteroids. The light from distant stars made the rocks sparkle like jewels. They called it the Field of Shattered Suns. Here they found something incredible, ancient wrecks of unknown origin, floating silently in the void. These weren't human, nor from any known alien civilization. They were far older. Exploration teams were sent to investigate. Inside the derelict structures, they discovered advanced materials, strange energy sources, and inscriptions that no one could read. Whatever beings had built these ships were gone long ago, but their legacy became a gift to humanity. Scientists worked day and night to study the technology, and slowly they began adapting parts of it to improve their own ships. The discovery gave new hope. For the first time since Exiled, people began to believe that maybe this endless journey wasn't just about survival. It was destiny. Maybe they were meant to find something greater beyond the galaxy's borders. As months passed, people started to call themselves the Children of the March. The name carried pride. It meant they were not victims anymore. They were pioneers. Each ship painted a new emblem, a small flame surrounded by stars. It symbolized humanity's light, surviving even in the darkest places. Still, the road ahead was not easy. One day, while passing through a dense asteroid belt, several ships were damaged. One of them lost its engines completely. The fleet could not stop, or they would risk collision with drifting rocks. A tough decision had to be made. The damaged ship signaled the others to keep moving. They said they would repair and catch up later, though everyone knew they didn't have enough power to escape. No one wanted to leave them behind. The fleet slowed down, torn between survival and loyalty. Then a smaller vessel broke formation and turned back. It was a cargo ship not built for rescue, but the crew refused to abandon their people. They transferred all their fuel and supplies to restart the damaged ship's engines. In the end, both ships made it out, barely. The act of sacrifice reminded everyone of what it truly meant to be human. Stories like that spread quickly. People began to share tales of kindness, bravery, and courage across ships. Whenever someone lost hope, another reminded them of those who had given everything for others. The fleet became a moving family, held together not by borders or flags, but by trust. There were nights when the stars seemed to vanish completely, leaving nothing but a black curtain. During those nights, people sang old Earth songs through the ship intercoms. Thousands of voices joined together across the network. It didn't matter that their voices were weak or off tune. It mattered that they were together. Then came a turning point. After more than a year of travel, their long-range sensors detected something faint, a cluster of planets orbiting a massive golden star. The readings showed breathable atmosphere, gravity close to Earth's, and signs of natural life. Excitement rippled through the fleet like electricity. They had found something at last. The ships changed course immediately. Every screen on every vessel lit up with the same message. New system detected. Coordinates locked. People wept, cheered, and hugged one another. Some prayed quietly, whispering words of gratitude to the stars. As they approached the system, the view filled their screens. A golden sun blazed ahead, surrounded by swirling clouds of light. Several planets glimmered in orbit. One in particular caught their attention, a vast blue-green world wrapped in storms and sunlight. It looked raw and wild, but alive. The fleet slowed as it entered orbit around the planet. For a long time, no one spoke. Everyone simply watched. It felt unreal. After so much loss and darkness, they had finally found something that looked like hope. The first landing teams were cautious. They descended through violent storms that lashed against their ships, lightning tearing across the skies. The surface was rough, filled with mountains, deep oceans, and strange glowing plants that pulsed with energy. The air was thick but breathable. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. When the first group stepped onto the soil, they didn't speak for a few seconds. Then one of them knelt, scooped up a handful of dirt, and held it to their chest. "We made it," they whispered. The message spread across the fleet instantly. Every ship erupted in celebration. People danced in the corridors, music filled the intercoms, and tears flowed freely. For the first time since exile, humanity had touched land again. That night, as the storms outside softened, the leaders of the fleet held a meeting. They decided to name the world Solara, a symbol of the light that had guided them through darkness. Solara would be their new beginning. From every ship, people sent out messages to the stars, not of anger or revenge, but of gratitude. "We are still here," they said. "We survived." The long march had come to an end, but it had changed them forever. They were no longer the same humans who had once lived under alien rule. They were stronger, wiser, and united in a way they had never been before. As the ship settled into orbit and the first cities began to take shape, people often looked up at the night sky of Solara. There, beyond the clouds, they could see the faint shimmer of the galaxy that had once cast them out. Yet no one looked at it with bitterness anymore. Instead, they saw it as a distant reminder. A chapter closed and a new one opened. Their exile had forced them to journey into the unknown. The darkness had tried to break them, but instead it had forged something unshakable. Humanity had turned exile into destiny. The long march had ended not in despair, but in the birth of a new world. And though they didn't know it yet, this was only the beginning. Beyond the storms of Solara, an empire was waiting to be born. An empire that would one day shine brighter than the stars themselves. When the fleet first saw Solara, no one could believe their eyes. The planet glowed with golden light, its surface alive with shifting storms and glittering oceans. After so long wandering through the empty dark, it looked like a dream made real. People pressed their faces to the viewing glass of their ships, staring at the swirling clouds and lightning that danced across the surface. For the first time in years, they were looking at a home, something solid, something alive. The first landing was rough. The planet's weather was wild, and the atmosphere was thick with electricity. The air shimmered and storms came without warning. The landing ships shook violently as they entered the skies. Some engines overheated, others lost power halfway down. But the pilots didn't turn back. They gritted their teeth and pushed forward, determined to plant humanity's feet on this new world. When the first group finally touched the ground, everything went quiet. The engines stopped humming, and for a few moments there was only the sound of wind. The soil was warm, almost metallic. Strange plants glowed faintly under the dim sunlight, moving gently as if breathing. The explorers stood still, their suits reflecting the golden light. One of them removed their glove and touched the ground directly. The surface buzzed faintly against the skin, alive, raw, and full of power. Soon message beacons were sent to the fleet above. "Solara is habitable. We can survive here." The response came instantly. Cheers erupted across every ship. Families embraced, people cried openly, and music filled the corridors once again. It was as if the whole human race had taken a single deep breath after years of holding it in. The fleet began sending more landing craft, carrying equipment, shelters, and materials. It took days before the first proper settlement started to form. They chose a vast plain near the equator, surrounded by mountains and rivers that glowed under the twin suns. The ground was rough and uneven, but it was rich with minerals and energy. It became the heart of the new human world. They built shelters out of the ship wreckage, metal walls, energy panels, and support beams that had once been part of their long journey. The settlement was not beautiful in the beginning. It was messy, loud, and covered in dust, but it was alive. Fires burned through the night and voices filled the air. People laughed while building, sang while working, and told stories of the journey that had brought them there. They named the first settlement New Dawn, a name chosen by vote across all ships. It symbolized what they had become, survivors who refused to fade away. Every dawn on Solara was breathtaking. The twin suns rose together, painting the sky in colors no one had ever seen before. Fiery orange, deep violet, and shimmering gold. Each sunrise reminded them that life had begun again. At first, survival was the only goal. The planet was unpredictable. Powerful storms rolled in from the oceans, tearing through their camps. The winds howled like beasts and lightning struck constantly, lighting up the night sky. The people had to build shelters that could resist nature's fury. They used old ship shields as barriers, set up underground bunkers, and learned how to predict the storms using the fleet's scanners. Slowly, they began to understand Solara's rhythm. The rise and fall of its winds, the changing seasons, and the way its energy moved across the land. The air of Solara was strange. It was rich in a gas that glowed faintly when exposed to heat. Scientists discovered it could be used as an energy source. This gas, later called selenium, became the most valuable discovery in their new world. It powered their lights, their engines, and even their weapons. It was as if the planet itself had been waiting for them, holding a gift beneath its storms. Every day brought new challenges. Food was scarce in the beginning. The alien plants were not all safe to eat, and the soil needed to be purified before crops could grow. The scientists and farmers worked side by side to create the first greenhouses. Slowly, life began to bloom inside transparent domes. Fresh vegetables, grains, and even small fruits began to appear. The taste of the first harvest made people cry. It was the flavor of survival, something they had earned with pain and patience. Soon, more settlements spread out from New Dawn, each one built near rivers or mineral-rich zones. They were connected by magnetic rail lines powered by selenium. The sight of those glowing rails cutting through the golden landscape became a symbol of progress. Humanity was no longer wandering. They were building. Over the years, the surface began to change. Metal towers rose among the mountains. Solar arrays stretched across valleys, and large cities formed beneath transparent domes that shimmered at night. Solara began to look like something out of an old dream, half nature, half machine, alive with the pulse of both. What surprised everyone most was how the people changed too. They had come from many nations and cultures, once divided by borders and politics. But on Solara there were no countries, no flags. They were simply human. The hardships of exile had erased the old differences. People helped one another, because they had no choice but to stand together. Out here, unity wasn't an idea, it was survival. The leaders of the fleet formed a council to guide this new society. They weren't chosen by power or wealth, but by skill and trust. Engineers, doctors, builders, and teachers all had a voice. The old way of ruling through fear or greed was gone. They had learned too much pain to repeat history. The council's goal was simple: keep humanity alive and make sure no one ever faced exile again. Years passed, and children were born under Solara's twin suns. They never knew Earth. To them, this wild world of gold and storms was home. They ran through glowing fields, climbed the magnetic towers, and learned stories of the long march through the dark. Their parents told them, "You come from travelers who never gave up. Remember that." Those words became a kind of oath passed through generations. One night, a storm unlike any before struck the main city. Lightning rained down for hours, setting towers ablaze and tearing apart the sky. The people gathered in shelters, watching the storm roar outside. Yet something unexpected happened. The great energy cores built from selenium didn't break. Instead, They absorbed the storm's power, glowing brighter and brighter until the entire city was wrapped in a shield of light. When the storm finally ended, the city still stood, untouched. That night changed everything. Humanity realized that Solara wasn't a world to be feared. It was a partner, a living force that could be understood and tamed. The storms were not punishment. They were power waiting to be harnessed. The people began building devices to channel the planet's natural energy. Towers that captured lightning. Reactors that drew strength from the winds. Soon the settlements no longer just survived the storms. They thrived on them. In the following decades, Solara became a world of light. Cities floated above the clouds powered by energy drawn directly from the planet's atmosphere. Ships designed on Solara could travel faster than ever before, using selenium-based engines that glowed like miniature suns. What had started as a small colony of survivors was now turning into something greater, a civilization born not from conquest, but from endurance. People often gathered on the high platforms at night to look up at the stars. Somewhere out there, beyond the darkness, the old galaxy still existed. The same council that had cast them out probably thought humanity was long gone. But the people of Solara smiled at that thought. They didn't need the galaxy anymore. They had built something better. Elders would tell the children stories of exile and hope, of the fleet that refused to die in the dark. They spoke of the moment when humanity touched Solara's soil for the first time and felt its pulse beneath their hands. Those stories became their history, their faith, their reminder of how far they had come. On the anniversary of their landing, the entire planet celebrated. Lights filled the sky, glowing brighter than the twin suns. From the highest towers to the smallest homes, people raised their hands toward the heavens. We were exiled, they said, but we found paradise. Solara had started as a dangerous, wild world. Over time, it became humanity's greatest triumph, a living testament to the strength of the human spirit. From the ashes of exile, a new civilization was being born. The people didn't know it yet, but the foundation they were building would one day give rise to something far greater than they could imagine. An empire forged not by dominance, but by resilience. The storms no longer frightened them. The dark no longer held power over them. Humanity had learned to turn every challenge into strength. Solara was no longer just a refuge, it was a forge. And from its fire, something extraordinary was beginning to take shape. The galaxy might have forgotten humanity, but soon the stars themselves would remember their name. Years passed on Solara, and the once small colonies began to shine like stars across the surface of the planet. The world that had once been wild and unpredictable was now alive with glowing cities, floating stations, and endless towers that reached toward the twin suns. Humanity had survived its exile, but survival was no longer enough. The people of Solara wanted more. They wanted to build something lasting, something that would prove that exile had not broken them, only made them stronger. Every morning, the sound of construction filled the air. Massive sky platforms floated above the storms, powered by selenium engines that glowed softly in the clouds. Workers in metallic suits moved along bridges of light, building new reactors, new cities, and new dreams. Children were born who had never known Earth, and yet they carried the same fire in their hearts, the same desire to reach beyond limits. The Council of Solara gathered every year at the Great Spire, the tallest structure ever built by human hands. It stood above the storms, a monument to everything they had overcome. Their leaders, scientists, and builders met to decide the next steps for humanity. Each year, the same question grew louder. What comes after survival? The answer came slowly, through the work of countless minds. Engineers began to test new kinds of ships, ones that could move through folded space rather than around it. These ships could cross vast distances in moments, using selenium energy to bend the laws of physics themselves. They called these vessels pathfinders because they could go where no map existed. The first test flight was a risk. If it failed, the ship and its crew would vanish into nothingness. Yet hundreds of people gathered to watch, standing under the glowing towers, eyes fixed on the sky. The engines flared, brighter than the twin suns, and then the ship disappeared, vanished into a flash of golden light. For a moment, the crowd went silent. Then, seconds later, the ship reappeared high above the clouds. It had worked. Humanity had learned to travel through folded space. The celebration that followed lasted for days. It wasn't just about a new machine. It was proof that exile had given birth to progress beyond imagination. The Council knew that this discovery changed everything. Humanity was no longer trapped to one world. They could expand again, not through war or conquest, but through creation. Soon, fleets of new ships filled the skies, each one faster and stronger than the last. They began exploring nearby systems, sending back images of new stars, strange planets, and endless potential. Colonies were established on moons and asteroids, connected by portals powered by selenium. Each colony carried a piece of Solara's spirit, a promise to never be small again. As humanity spread across the frontier, something remarkable began to happen. The people didn't just copy their old ways, they built new ones. Every colony was guided by the same principles: unity, balance, and growth. No one ruled by fear anymore. Every person was seen as part of the same story. The ships became homes for new explorers, who mapped galaxies and returned with knowledge rather than conquest. The scientists on Solara studied the strange energies of deep space, learning to control gravity, time, and even matter itself. What once took entire civilizations thousands of years to learn, humans achieved in decades. Solara became known as the Heart World. From its orbit, fleets came and went, carrying supplies and new settlers to distant stars. Its cities glowed brighter than ever, powered by the storms they had once feared. The people of Solara had become masters of energy, bending it to their will. The storms that once threatened their survival were now their greatest resource. In time, the idea of forming something greater, a union of all human worlds, began to take shape. It was not a government born from power, but from purpose. They called it the Solarian Empire, not as a symbol of domination, but of endurance. It stood for everything humanity had become: unbreakable, united, and forward-looking. The announcement of the Empire's founding was broadcast across every colony, every ship, every settlement under Solara's light. People stopped what they were doing and listened. The voice that spoke was calm but strong. We were cast out to die, but we have built life instead. We are no longer the lost children of Earth. We are Solarians, the children of light. Every person felt those words sink deep into their heart. For the first time in history, humanity didn't belong to one planet or one system. They belonged to the stars. As the years turned into centuries, Solara became a legend across the regions they explored. The Solarian Empire built starports the size of cities, massive floating citadels that shone with golden light. The Empire's ships were unlike anything ever seen before. Their hulls were smooth and alive, their cores pulsing with energy drawn from the storms of Solara. Some could even repair themselves, their metal flowing like water. The people who piloted these ships weren't soldiers, they were guardians. Their mission wasn't to conquer, but to protect the fragile balance of life wherever they went. They carried Solara's symbol, a sun wrapped in a storm, as a reminder of where they came from. Every colony, every new world bore that same mark. Still, not everything was peaceful. Beyond the known systems, humanity encountered other civilizations, some curious, others fearful. Old memories of the Galactic Council's betrayal still lingered in human hearts. Yet instead of meeting fear with anger, the Solarians chose a different path. They shared knowledge. They traded. They helped. They had learned from their past that survival meant more than strength. It meant understanding. When smaller species or lost travelers crossed their space, the Solarians offered aid. When dying worlds called for help, they sent ships. Over time, stories began to spread through the stars about the Empire of Light, a civilization that had risen from exile to become a force for hope. Within the Empire, art, music, and science flourished together. The people had more than technology, they had purpose. They built libraries inside asteroids, floating gardens above planets, and monuments to those who had perished during the long march through the dark. In one of the great cities of Solara, a massive hall was built entirely out of translucent crystal. Inside it burned an eternal flame powered by pure selenium. It was called the Flame of Exile, and it never went out. Every visitor, whether a worker or a leader, would stand before it in silence, remembering the generations that had suffered so humanity could stand here now. The Empire's strength came not from domination, but from its unity. People from all backgrounds worked side by side, bound by the same dream: to never repeat the mistakes that had once led to their exile. Their laws were built on fairness. their cities designed for balance between progress and nature. For the first time in history, humanity had learned how to grow without destroying what surrounded them. The galaxy that had once rejected them remained distant, unaware of what had risen beyond its borders. Yet rumors began to spread among traders and wanderers, rumors of human ships that could appear and disappear in golden flashes, of cities that floated among storms, of a people who had turned lightning into life. The council that had once exiled humanity dismissed these as myths. Humans are gone, they said. They perished long ago in the void. But not everyone believed that. Some remembered the fire in humanity's eyes, the way they refused to bow. Deep down, the galaxy knew the truth. If humans had survived, they would not have returned as victims. They would have returned transformed. Back on Solara, as the twin suns set and the night storms began to glow across the horizon, the people often gathered in silence. They watched the skies filled with the trails of ships departing for unknown worlds. Each one carried their hope, their legacy, and their unshakable spirit. No one called them exiles anymore. They were the builders of worlds, the guardians of light, and the proof that even rejection could become rebirth. The storms that once threatened to destroy them had become their greatest allies. The energy that once scared them now powered an empire. The loneliness that once haunted them had turned into purpose. Humanity had taken everything meant to break them and turned it into the foundation of their greatness. The Solarian Empire had no throne, no crown, and no single ruler. Its true strength lived in the hearts of its people, in their courage, their unity, and their endless hunger to explore. Out there, beyond the stars, they found peace not through power, but through understanding. They had become more than survivors. They had become something timeless, and though the galaxy still whispered of them in disbelief, the truth was simple. The exiled children of Earth had forged an empire beyond the heavens. Their light would never fade again. Centuries had passed since humanity was exiled from the galaxy, yet their story had never truly ended. The Solarian Empire had grown far beyond anyone's imagination, spreading through countless systems and living in harmony among the stars. But while peace filled most corners of their empire, whispers had begun to reach Solara. The same galaxy that once cast humanity out was now facing chaos. The old Galactic Council, the very force that had judged Earth as unfit, was falling apart. Their great alliance of alien species, once proud and powerful, had started to crumble under its own greed and fear. Trade routes had collapsed, wars had broken out between factions, and corruption had spread faster than light. Planets that once ruled others were now starving, and many began to vanish from the stars entirely. For the longest time, the Solarian Empire had watched quietly. They believed in peace, not revenge. But when they started receiving distress signals from those who had once condemned them, the people of Solara faced a question that shook their hearts. Should they help, or should they let the galaxy face the fate it had chosen for itself? In the great spire of Solara, the Council of the Empire gathered. The hall shimmered with golden light, and the air was filled with quiet tension. Every representative from the colonies had come, from the icy moons to the storm worlds. They all knew what was at stake. The galaxy that once rejected them was now asking for mercy. Some voices said no. They exiled us. They left us to die. Why should we save them now? They argued. Others stood firm, saying that vengeance would only poison what humanity had built. They reminded everyone of the flame that burned in the crystal hall, the flame of exile, that symbolized not bitterness, but rebirth. The debate went on for days, yet one truth became clear. Humanity had outgrown hate. The people who had once crawled through dust and storm had now built cities in the skies. They didn't need revenge. They needed purpose, and so the council made its decision. Humanity would return to the galaxy, not as exiles, not as conquerors, but as saviors. They would go back to the same worlds that had turned their backs on them, not with weapons, but with open hands. When the decision was announced, the Empire moved like a single heartbeat. Fleets were prepared across the stars, each one carrying supplies, engineers, and healers. These were not warships, though they were powerful enough to defend themselves. They were called dawn carriers, each one glowing with golden light that cut through the darkness of space. The journey back to the galaxy was long, but when the first fleet arrived at its borders, every sensor and satellite across alien space lit up. For centuries, the galaxy had forgotten humanity. believing them long dead. So when the Solarian ships appeared, shining brighter than any known vessel, panic spread among the remaining alien factions. They remembered what humans had been: warriors, inventors, survivors, and they feared what they might have become. Warnings spread through the channels of what remained of the Council. The exiles have returned, but when the humans hailed the first system, they did not demand surrender. Their message was simple: we are not here to rule. We are here to rebuild. At first, the aliens didn't believe it. They expected retaliation, punishment, or conquest. Yet when the Solarian fleets began restoring broken reactors, feeding starving colonies, and healing radiation-sick worlds, doubt turned into astonishment. A once arrogant species called the Terran, who had been part of the Council that voted to exile Earth, found themselves on the edge of extinction after their planet's sun destabilized. They sent a desperate call for help, not expecting an answer. Yet within days, the humans arrived. They stabilized the star with their technology, saving billions of Terran lives. The Terran people, once humanity's loudest critics, fell silent in awe. Soon word spread across the stars. Humanity had returned not to destroy but to save. Worlds that had been burning with war saw the light of Solarian ships descend through their skies, bringing peace instead of death. The once broken systems began to heal. Still, not everyone welcomed them. Some alien warlords feared losing control. They attacked Solarian fleets hoping to drive them away. Yet the humans did not fight back in anger. Their ships moved with precision, disarming attacks without bloodshed. Instead of revenge, they showed mercy, repairing enemy ships, helping wounded soldiers, and leaving behind supplies before disappearing back into the stars. For the first time in recorded history, the galaxy saw what humanity had truly become. They were no longer the emotional, divided race they once mocked. They had turned their pain into strength, their exile into wisdom. On Solara, the flame of exile burned brighter than ever. It was said that its glow could be seen from orbit, as if it knew humanity's destiny had come full circle. As the Solarian Empire spread aid across the galaxy, old rivalries began to fade. Former enemies began working together again, following the example humanity set. The galaxy started to change, not through laws or fear but through inspiration. A new galactic assembly was proposed, one not based on dominance, but on unity. And this time the Solarian Empire was invited, not as a servant but as a guide. The same galaxy that had once voted to cast Earth away now asked humanity to help lead it toward peace. When the first meeting was held, the hall was filled with hundreds of species from every corner of known space. In the center stood the Solarian envoy, a simple representative dressed not in armor or robes but in the plain white suit of a builder. When he spoke, the hall fell silent. "Long ago you sent us away," he said. "We could have become your enemies. Instead, we became your reflection. We learned that light is strongest when born from darkness. We do not ask for your apology. We ask for your cooperation. Together we can build a galaxy that no longer fears its own shadow." The room erupted in quiet applause. Some wept, others bowed their heads in shame. The message was clear. The age of division had ended. From that day onward, the Solarian Empire became more than just a name. It became a symbol of rebirth, a reminder that even the deepest wounds could lead to the greatest strength. Human and alien worlds began trading openly. Scientists shared discoveries. Artists collaborated across species. The once broken galaxy began to shine again, brighter than it ever had before. Still, within the hearts of the Solarian people, there remained a quiet awareness. They knew peace was fragile. They knew power could corrupt even the kindest hearts, so they made a promise to never forget where they came from. Every child born under Solara's suns was taught the story of Earth, the exile, the struggle, and the rise. It wasn't a story of revenge, it was a story of becoming. One evening, as the twin suns of Solara began to set, a group of young explorers stood on a balcony overlooking the glowing cities below. They were preparing for a journey beyond even the known galaxies to places where no signal had ever reached. One of them looked toward the stars and whispered, "Do you think they'll ever forget what we were?" An elder smiled and replied, "No, because we didn't come back to be remembered. We came back to remind them that light never truly dies. It just travels farther." The next morning, the explorer's ship lifted off, joining hundreds of others that streaked across the sky. The stars above shimmered with trails of gold like brushstrokes across the dark. The galaxy that once rejected them now thrived under their light. And deep in the heart of Solara, the eternal flame continued to burn, whispering softly through the ages, a flame that began with exile but ended in hope. Humanity had done what no species had ever done before. They had turned their punishment into purpose, their suffering into strength, and their isolation into inspiration. The galaxy finally understood. Exile had not broken humanity. It had forged them into something greater, and now beyond the heavens their journey had only just begun. Generations passed, and the story of humanity's exile became more than just history. It became legend. The children born in the Solarian Empire didn't remember Earth with sadness anymore. They remembered it with pride. They were taught that Earth was where everything began, the world that shaped humanity's heart and strength. Though their ancestors had been cast out, they had built something greater than anyone could have imagined. The Solarian Empire stretched farther than any map could show. It reached into distant galaxies, connecting worlds that had never known one another before. Massive stations floated between stars, serving as homes for thousands of travelers. New planets were settled, not for power or resources, but for learning, exploration, and peace. The Empire no longer needed armies. It had builders, explorers, and thinkers who worked together to keep the balance. Despite all their progress, humans never forgot their story. Every year, across every colony and every ship, a single day was set aside for remembrance. They called it the Day of the Flame. On that day, every city dimmed its lights and the people stood together under the stars. In silence, they watched the great beacon of Solara, the eternal flame of exile, shine through the darkness. It reminded them how far they had come and how much they had endured to reach this peace. But even as the Solarian Empire flourished, new challenges appeared. Not every world understood their ideals. Some younger species, who had grown up hearing only stories of the Solarians' power, began to see them as distant gods rather than fellow beings. A few rebel worlds refused to join the Empire's unity projects, claiming that humanity had become too strong. The Solarian leaders didn't respond with anger. They sent envoys, teachers, scientists, healers to those worlds. They believed fear could be softened by understanding, and slowly most of the rebellions faded, not through war but through trust. The people saw that the Solarians didn't come to rule, they came to share. Across the galaxy, old rivalries disappeared. Alien worlds that had once fought for dominance now sent ambassadors to Solara, seeking wisdom. The Empire became not just a political power, but a guiding light, a network of worlds that believed in creation over destruction. One of the most important projects of the later age was the memory vaults. They were vast structures built across the Empire, each one filled with knowledge, history, and art from thousands of civilizations. The Solarians wanted to protect every story, every culture, so that no world would ever be forgotten again. They remembered too well what it meant to be erased. These vaults glowed like suns in space. Pilgrims traveled from every corner of the known universe to visit them. Within their crystal halls, you could see recordings of ancient battles, songs from vanished species, and memories of worlds that no longer existed. Each vault was guarded by a single promise: nothing that lives will ever be forgotten again. Over time, the Solarian people began to evolve in other ways too. Their bodies adapted to new environments. Some lived among oceans, some on ice planets, and some in low-gravity colonies that floated through nebulae. They were still human, but their appearances changed with their worlds. Yet the spirit that connected them never faded. Wherever they went, they carried a piece of Solara's light within them. It was said that every Solarian child, no matter where they were born, could see the glow of Solara's twin suns in their dreams. It was as if the memory of their ancestors traveled with them through their blood. Centuries later, a strange signal was discovered beyond the edge of the mapped universe. It wasn't a distress call or a threat. It was a pattern, rhythmic and repeating, something that sounded almost like a heartbeat. It came from deep space far beyond where any ship had ever gone. Scientists studied it for years, but no one could explain it. The pattern was steady, alive, and very old. The Solarian Council gathered to discuss it. Some believed it was a natural phenomenon. Others thought it might be a message, perhaps from a civilization even older than the galaxy itself. There was one thing everyone agreed on: it needed to be explored. So the Empire built a new kind of ship, unlike anything before. It was named the Horizon Seeker. It was massive yet graceful, powered by the purest selenium ever refined. Its engines could fold space beyond known limits. It was designed to travel where light itself had never reached. The crew that volunteered for the mission came from every world in the Empire, humans, hybrids, and even allies from alien species who had grown close to humanity over the centuries. Their mission was simple: follow the signal and discover its source. As the Horizon Seeker prepared to launch, billions gathered across the Empire to watch. The skies of Solara lit up as the ship rose, shimmering in gold and white. The flame of exile burned brighter than ever that night, as if giving its blessing to the travelers. The ship vanished into folded space, leaving a golden streak behind. Months passed, then years. The people of the Empire waited, sending signals into the void, but none came back. The Horizon Seeker was gone, yet hope never faded. The Solarians had learned that silence didn't always mean loss. It often meant discovery. So they waited. Then, after decades, a faint signal returned. It wasn't words, but a vision. Images of galaxies no one had ever seen. Stars so vast they made Solara look like a spark, and worlds teeming with life far older than the known universe. The crew had found something beyond everything humanity had ever known. Their final message was brief, but it echoed across every screen, every communicator, every ship in the Empire. We have found the beginning. After that, the signal ended. The Solarian Council was silent for days. No one truly knew what the crew had discovered, whether it was the birthplace of the universe, an ancient civilization, or something divine. Yet one truth became clear: humanity's journey had not ended with their empire. It had only just begun again on a new horizon. Over time, monuments were built to honor the crew of the Horizon Seeker. Their faces were carved into the crystal walls of the Flame Hall. Pilgrims visited, leaving notes, gifts, and prayers. They didn't mourn the lost, they celebrated them, because those explorers had carried forward the same courage that once guided the first humans through exile. The Solarian Empire continued to grow, but not just outward, it grew inward. People began to look deeper into themselves, asking what it meant to be human when surrounded by stars. The answer, passed through generations, was simple. Humanity was not a species. It was a spirit, a will to rise, to build, to learn, and to love even after pain. Many years later, when the twin suns of Solara began to cool, the Empire prepared for one final transformation. The people decided they would not let their home fade into darkness. Using their greatest technology, they built colossal light engines within Solara's core. When the suns dimmed, those engines ignited, turning the entire planet into a shining beacon, a star of their own making. Now, travelers passing through that region of space see a golden light glowing among the stars. It isn't a natural sun. It's Solara itself, still burning, still shining, still alive. The legend says that if you listen closely while near it, you can hear a faint echo, the sound of the storms that once tried to destroy humanity, now whispering softly like a song of triumph. In the end, the galaxy that once exiled them became only one chapter of a much greater story. Humanity had gone beyond the heavens, beyond hate, beyond limitation. They had turned every loss into a lesson, every wound into wisdom, every exile into eternity. Their empire lived on, not in walls or weapons, but in the hearts of those who carried the light. And somewhere far beyond even Solara's glow, perhaps the crew of the Horizon Seeker still travels, chasing the heartbeat of creation, carrying with them the spirit of every soul that ever dared to hope. The story of humanity didn't end with exile. It became the story of rebirth, of courage, and of endless light. Because no matter how far they went, no matter how many stars they crossed, one truth remained unshakable. Humanity was never just a race. They were a promise that no darkness could ever truly silence the light.